What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Push the Tempo podcast. I have no idea what episode number this is, but uh, both of our teams, the Celtics and the Clippers, played last night. Today is February 6th, and these games are usually, at least the last three or four matchups, have been very good. This matchup had some key players out. For the Celtics, Marcus Smart and Jalen Brown were out, and for the Clippers, Patrick Beverley and Paul George were out. But regardless of that, it was a great game. So we just wanted to hop on and give our thoughts about the game. And if we have time, we're going to talk about these two teams and their seasons so far. So, Ari, what did you think about this game?
Honestly, going into this game, I thought that my team, the Celtics, were going to lose. I thought missing Jalen Brown was going to be huge, and especially Marcus Smart. He's basically the anchor of that team defensively, and he's probably their best playmaker as well. So I coming into the game, I thought they were going to get blown out, but then news came out that Paul George was also out. So I thought that was going to be pretty close, but Kemba hasn't been playing as good as some of his prior seasons. So I definitely thought it was going to be a blowout. And I'm usually the last person to be pessimistic about my own team, but the Clippers are just that good of a team. So that's what I thought going into it. But I mean, that wasn't the case. The Celtics ended up winning by 4. So that was just my initial thoughts that they were going to lose, but they ended up having a pretty decent game and pulling through at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, even with these two guys out, or these four guys out, and all four of them are key rotation players to their teams, the game was pretty great. Like you said, Kemba so far has kind of been struggling since he's come back from his injury. In the first half, that was the case. I didn't think he was that great in the first half. He was missing shots, really not getting to the line. But in that second half, I thought he really turned it on, particularly in that fourth quarter. I think he scored 10 points in the fourth quarter. He hit the jumper that gave the Celtics the lead with I believe it was like 15 seconds or something like that left. And all in all, man, that third quarter by the Celtics, Carson Edwards, ever since his Instagram got hacked, he's been really playing well. And that third quarter, the Celtics hit a bunch of threes. The Clippers continued to turn the ball over, and that's when they took control of the game. And the Clippers played well in that fourth, but it just wasn't enough of a comeback.
Yeah, honestly though, I'm kind of disappointed just because like you said, the last few matchups have been super close. Last year they played twice, and the first game went into OT, and the second game went into double OT, if I remember correctly. And at the time, both the teams were pretty much 100%, and it was just a back and forth, and the games were so like interesting. And it sucks because they're both in different conferences, which means they're only going to play twice a year. And this is one of them right here, which kind of sucks because like we've been saying, a lot of players have been out, so I can't wait for the next time that they match up. But who knows? This could be a finals preview, but I mean, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. But these two teams are just so close comparably. Like a lot of people say the Celtics are the Clippers of the East and vice versa. Paul George and Kawhi are very similar to Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. And just the similarities between these two teams are really close. So I just thought that this matchup would be a lot more fun to watch, but can never get 100% full game. But it is what it is.
Yeah, one of the matchups that a lot of people, both of us as well, were looking at was the Kawhi versus Jason Tatum matchup. And I think it's safe to say that Jason Tatum outplayed Kawhi in this game. Jason Tatum finished with, I believe, it was 34 points. He hit five threes. One of the biggest reasons that the Celtics were able to mount that huge comeback in the third quarter and hit all those threes was because the Clippers play this drop coverage versus teams, and not only did that leave Tatum open for a bunch of open shots that he hit, but it also when the Clippers would bring help to help the person getting screened so that the big man could continue to drop, it would leave guys like Carson Edwards open who hit a few threes in that quarter, I believe, as well. Yeah, man. Jason Tatum is, I mean, you obviously watch him more, so you can definitely give a better analysis on him. But I think, dude, he looks. What is he like now? 6'10", 6'8", 6'9", something like that.
I think Brad Stevens said he was 6'10" in the last measurement that he got.
Yeah, that's crazy. He's like 2 inches shy of 7 feet, and he can move and dribble and shoot like that. He's gonna be a problem for years to come. And with Jalen Brown also making this leap this year, like the Celtics going to be a scary duo. Like that duo is going to be tough to deal with for a long time.
Definitely. But another thing I just want to kind of add on is, um, about the Clippers. Kawhi is so much better of a playmaker than I initially thought. Like coming into the season, I didn't think he was the best playmaker, and obviously the Clippers lack a little bit playmaking, especially in their point guard position. And I guess Kawhi has kind of asserted that role onto himself. And I saw, although he only had 5 assists, I saw him making a lot of plays for his teammates. They just weren't knocking down all the shots, but he was driving in, kicking it out. He was looking for that pass early on, and it was just good to see from Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Kawhi kind of struggled, particularly in that fourth quarter. But you're right, he has improved vastly as a playmaker. But one of the guys who I thought had a pretty big impact on this game was Grant Williams for the Celtics. He hit some open shots, and that's kind of been the struggle with him is that if he's not hitting his open threes, but teams will leave him open because they'll count on him to they'll rather him beat them than the other great players in the Celtics like Tatum and Kemba and Jalen Brown. And in this game, like he was beating the Clippers. He hit three of his four threes. I thought he played pretty great defense on Kawhi. He's a pretty big, like he's a pretty stout guy. So like when Kawhi would try posting him up to go to his fadeaway, he couldn't really back him down and move him out of his position. So I thought he had a pretty big impact in this game. Carson Edwards, like I said, he came in, hit three threes, hit five of his eight shots. I thought his shots really were swinging the momentum. Particularly in that third quarter when the Celtics went like on a 16-4 run, they turned a 7-point deficit at halftime for them into an 11-point lead. So that was an 18-point turnaround in just a matter of a quarter. Yeah, uh, those guys I thought had a pretty big impact. And like I said earlier, Kemba really did his thing, particularly in that fourth quarter. In that second half, he got going, and that's one of the Clippers' biggest problems is they struggle to contain these guards that can slash to the rim and really put the defense in disarray when they attack the paint.
Yeah, just going off what you said, what's kind of crazy about Grant Williams? And I was just kind of looking at stats right now. I remember last year he started off shooting from the three. He missed his first 20 or so 3-pointer attempts. So just kind of because of that, he ended up the year with 25% from three. This year he's shooting 48.5% from three, which is kind of insane. Regardless, it's not like a bunch of attempts, it's 2 attempts per game, but still 48% from three from a guy like that a lot of people just, kind of just disregard and let him shoot. It's kind of insane. But with that being said, I'm not going to say he's like that, and especially him and Carson Edwards. These are two guys that rarely see playing time. Grant Williams sees it more than Carson Edwards, but Carson Edwards got 30 minutes, which he usually gets probably sometimes he doesn't even get games to play, but he scored 16. And I'm gonna be honest, he's not like that in my opinion. I mean, he's definitely a great player, but I think it was more of the Celtics bench player just stepping up than it was how the Celtics play in general. That's what I think this win is going to go towards. But that being said, it was definitely nice as a Celtics fan to see these guys stepping up, especially Carson Edwards. And then another guy I just want to quickly mention is my boy PP, fast PP as the Celtics NBC crew calls him. Peyton Pritchard, he put on he just came back from injury, so I'm not going to say too much, but definitely a guy that I really like coming to that season, just kind of filling in that backup role as point guard.
Yeah, like you said, those two guys, Carson Edwards and Peyton Pritchard, played solid, and they had to kind of pick up the slack, particularly for the bench with Jeff Teague playing as bad as he did. I remember I
Bro, he
texted you.
is garbage, man. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I texted you in the game. I was like, dude, Jeff Teague sucks. Like, shouldn't be seeing minutes. So the Clippers kind of had a similar thing happen with them. Reggie Jackson, since Patrick Beverly has been starting for the Clippers, and as of late, he's been playing really well. And even I apologized to him. I was like, dude, this guy, like, I didn't want him on the team for long, and I thought he should not at the very least not play. But in this game, he kind of proved me right. He was not playing well. Just a lot of the decision making was poor. The defense was non-existent as usual. But the guys who stepped up in his bad play were Lou Williams and Luke Kennard. One of the things that I was a little disappointed by, particularly just like with the Clippers, is that in that first half, I thought Luke Kennard was awesome. I think he scored 13 points at the start of the game. He hit like back-to-back corner threes, so he really got started getting it going and got me really excited because Luke Kennard. The biggest problem with him right now is the confidence. A lot of the times he's hesitant to shoot because he's on the court with other great players like Kawhi, like Paul George. But when he's when he's playing aggressive and looking for his shots, that just adds another facet to the Clippers offense because he's a dead eye shooter and because he can put the ball on the floor and do some stuff with it. In that second half, they kind of went away from him, which kind of sucks. I thought he could continue to have a big impact in the game, but in that fourth quarter, Lou Williams was the Clippers' best player. He's a guy who I've said that we should trade because he's not good come playoff time and he's a bad defender. But in that fourth quarter, he scored 14 points, hit 4 or 5 shots, and he looked like the old Lou Williams. He got to the rim against Tristan Thompson once, and he hit a big three that kept the player that gave the Clippers a little bit of a just like a slight, I should say like a slight opening to win the game, which they ended up obviously losing. But Lou Williams was really good in that fourth, but they just couldn't stop Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum, who just were pretty great in this game.
Yeah, no, Lou Williams was definitely playing out of his mind compared to how he's been playing for the regular season. But I feel like the Clippers are really missing Patrick Beverly, and that's a guy that can put Kemba in check. Obviously, he's not going to stop 100% of the time, but he's definitely going to, be an irritant and kind of just get some plays going, some hustle plays to kind of stop Kemba and even probably Tatum, to be honest. Um, and one thing I'm surprised about the Clippers is how much minutes they're giving to Batum. He's honestly kind of turned his career around. He was basically so like irrelevant in the past few seasons, and now he's came to the Clippers. He's shooting the ball, he's playmaking, he's defending, and it's just a good sight to see for a guy like him. And he even gets more playing time than Marcus Morris. And Marcus Morris, when he was on the Celtics, was a beast. Like he was literally probably at times a second or third option on offense on a team with Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and Kyrie Irving. So I'm kind of surprised to see that he's not playing as we expect of him. But I mean, he is coming off an injury earlier this season. But I like to see the ball more in his hands because he's definitely a guy that can create his own shot and shoot the ball at a high rate.
Yeah, man. Nick Batum is he's a guy when the Clippers signed him, I thought, okay, he's probably gonna play like 10 to 15 minutes off the bench, probably contribute like 4 points. I knew he was a good passer, maybe like 3 assists, a rebound or two, but he's been like a legitimate Clippers rotation player, and up till now, you can make a legit argument that he's been the Clippers either third or fourth best player, depending on where you put Patrick Beverly. But no, yeah, you're right. Nick Batum, he's been hitting open shots, which the Clippers generate a lot of open threes, which is one of the reasons that they're shooting the best 3 point percentage of any team in the NBA currently. I believe it's at like 41 or 42%, which leads the league. He hits a bunch of corner threes. He always makes the right play. In the game the Clippers played versus the Magic, there was this one play where he caught the ball on a cut, and the defender that was guarding Paul George in the corner came towards him, and before even landing, he threw a skip pass to Paul George with a corner three. Those kind of like quick decisions, they're my favorite type of plays, like the hockey assist you could call it. And he just has a very high IQ, and he's a very high IQ basketball player. So he's been playing very well. Um, but yeah, man, this game was just a really fun game all in all. Tatum, like I said, was amazing. I thought Kawhi kind of struggled, particularly at the end of that fourth quarter. He missed that jumper. I believe it was over Grant Williams, like I said earlier, who was defending him pretty well. And I believe he also missed a 3 point jumper, which was wide open, as well as. Did you remember the end of that game when Tatum turned the ball over and Nick Batum stole it, and then the Clippers immediately turned it back over to the Celtics? I
Yeah,
thought that
yeah, yeah.
was
Right at the end, yeah.
yeah. I got really excited once Nick Batum stole it and then immediately turned it over, which kind of sucked. But yeah, man.
Bro, my heart stopped because Kemba had the ball, and we all remember that Lakers game that the Celtics played a few days ago, where Kemba had the ball at the end of the game, and it was kind of a scramble, but he had a good look, and I was like, no, not again, not again. But Kemba's really, I don't know what to say about him. I have a kind of a love hate relationship with him. It's like I want to trade him, I don't want to trade him sometimes. I don't know, man. It's weird because as the Celtics, like when they got him, I thought he would be a lot more consistent. And I knew what I was going to get out of him. But there's days where he's, Kemba Walker, and there's days where he's, cardio Kemba, where he's just running around doing nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like you got to give him a little bit more time. Did he play in the bubble? He did, right?
Hmm.
So like I feel like you got to, because remember he came back to the bubble. I'm pretty sure like he wasn't fully ready, and that knee was still giving him problems even then. And I remember him really struggling in that Miami series, and I don't know, I'm not sure if it was in the Toronto series as well. You could
Yeah,
probably
no,
speak to that.
he was getting destroyed in the zone, and even honestly, Marcus Smart outplayed him in probably the entire playoffs. Definitely in that Miami series and the Toronto series. The Philly series was kind of, like it was. I mean, it wasn't like it was a pretty easy series compared to the other ones, but nonetheless, Smart outplayed Kemba, and Kemba's supposed to be that point guard, that guy that always scores, but he wasn't really, doing it. But yeah, definitely agree that it's probably because of his knee. But I mean, I would expect something from Kemba, but that's what, that's something for another video.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I just feel like you gotta give him some more time. This game, he kind of broke loose and had his best game of the season as so far, and hopefully he can build on this. I'm not sure what this Celtics schedule looks like coming up, but yeah, it's pointing at an upward trajectory as of right now, considering the game he just came off last night, particularly that second half. I thought he was great.
Honestly, I'm just kind of looking forward to March 2nd, where there's a rematch. I hope Celtics can go 2-0, but more importantly, I hope that everyone on both teams are fully healthy, because this is like I said, this is a series, or a matchup that I love to see. It's been an amazing two teams back and forth every single year. Clippers took one last year, the Celtics took one last year as well. So far, Celtics are 1-0.
So, do you want to? So, based off the health part, do you want to talk about that real quick with both the Celtics and the Clippers?
Yeah, yeah. What do you mean though?
So with the Celtics, Jalen Brown, I believe it was like a sore ankle or a sore knee that kept him out. I think he aggravated it in the game versus the Sacramento Kings. He's listed as day to day, so he'll be back sooner rather than later. And he's been having a great season, so he's definitely a big piece that they're missing. But the Marcus Smart injury, when it happened, I thought that was very serious. It was a non-contact injury, and it did not look good. But thankfully, what was it? Just like a strained calf, right, or something like
Yeah, it
that.
was a calf strain. Yeah.
So he should. How long will be out? 3 to 4 weeks at most.
Yeah, it's expected to be 3 to 4 weeks. Marcus Smart's a pretty tough dude, so honestly, I don't think that'll push past that unless there's some type of unforeseen incident. But he's a pretty tough dude. He's been injured a lot, but he always finds a way to come back to the court. So that's just one thing to know.
Yeah, the Celtics definitely need him. And then with the Clippers, Patrick Beverly, the sore knee has kept him out this entire road trip that the Clippers just came back from. I believe it's been 7 or 8 games now. Um, this has been a problem for Beverly, I'd say, just consistently over the past 2 or 3 years. The lower body injuries have really been nagging him to the point where the people, when they talk about that Denver series versus the Clippers versus Denver in the playoffs last year, they always mention that the Clippers choked and Kawhi and PG played awful in that series. But what they fail to remember is that Patrick Beverly was on a minutes restriction, and I believe he could only play like 20 minutes because he just wasn't healthy enough because of that knee. Um, so I really hope Patrick Beverly can get fully healthy and come back, and because he's a very, like you said, he's a vital piece of the team. The defensive intensity, not just that, but Kawhi even said that when he's not on the court, that the team is just a lot more quiet. They don't communicate as much because he's one of the guys who's just he's always just talking and yelling out defensive assignments and rotations and such. But the other one, and this one definitely makes you sad because you have him on your fantasy team, Paul George. He has the bone, is edema or edema. I'm not sure how you say it, but that we don't know the severity of the injury yet. But I believe Robert Williams had something similar, right?
As far as I know, I mean, I'm not no doctor or anything like that, but it was a hip injury. I don't know if it was because of that same bone issue, but I mean, I just know that Robert Williams had a hard time coming back to the court, and it took some time for him, probably about a few months, to finally get back to full shape.
Yeah, I think it was like a hip problem that he was out 3 to 4 months, something like that, right?
Yeah, it was like every time he would be ready to go, he was supposed to come back. This is last year. He was supposed to come back before the All Star game. Then he couldn't come back, and then it just kept getting delayed and delayed. And he started off with a few minutes, and it was just hard for him to stay on the court. But I'm not sure
Right.
if it's the same issue or not. But if it is, that's definitely a big blow to the Clippers.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, it's tough for Paul George, particularly. This is a guy who's had multiple serious injuries throughout his career. We obviously everybody remembers when he broke his leg in the Team USA scrimmage. But since then, he had the double shoulder surgery. He's had some hamstring problems, and now this. Just right now, we as fans don't really know the severity of the injury and how bad it is. It could be something that keeps him out 3 to 4 weeks to even longer, maybe months, which would suck. So we just hope for the best that Paul George that it's nothing too serious and he can bounce back and not miss too much time, so he can continue to just build a rhythm with the team because that's at this point that's what's most important. And obviously he was having his best season since his MVP third place MVP finish season. So yeah, well wishes to Paul George and just I hope he can get back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like I said, these two teams have a ton of firepower on their team. Just right now this season, health is definitely an issue. But yeah, with that being said, do you want to talk about predictions for them for the rest of the season?
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to start off with the Celtics? And you can probably give your piece because you obviously watch them night in, night out.
So this game, like I said before, is definitely not a representation of the Celtics team. Like a lot of guys were out, but even with that being said, a lot of times these guys on the bench, they don't really step up. A lot of these guys have a love-hate relationship with. I mean, there's gonna be days. That's the thing about the Celtics team; they're pretty inconsistent at times. Aside from a few players, like you'll have a game where Tatum goes off, and then you have a game where Tatum shoots, pretty bad. And then it's just kind of like a rotating thing. One day it'll be Kemba, one day it'll be Tatum, one day it'll be Brown. But like aside from that, these bench guys, they're not really that big on scoring. And that's why I really liked fast PP as they call him, Peyton Pritchard, because he would come off the bench and get a lot of scoring done. And one of the Celtics' biggest weakness this year is actually their depth. And that kind of sucks because, a few years ago, they were known for having a huge depth and a huge core. But
Yep.
without Hayward and, all these guys, it's kind of put them in a different situation than they were before. It's like if the starters don't perform, the Celtics basically lose, and the bench typically doesn't perform. And it was just kind of a good sight to see for them. But you know, in order for the Celtics to make a deep playoff run, they're gonna need these guys to perform off the bench, and that's just my take.
Yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment that they're not as deep as they used to be. I remember a few years back, I believe it was uh, the 2019 season, right? That they came into the year as the favorites to win the Eastern Conference because their starting lineup had like Kyrie, it had Hayward coming back, it had Tatum, Jalen Brown, and then off the bench they still had guys like Marcus Smart, they had Marcus Morris, and
I can't even talk. Al Horford too, man. That
uh,
team was so nice, man, on paper.
right, that team, like you said, is just that was the team that everybody picked to win the Eastern Conference, and people said that they could even give the Warriors a run for their money. It just ended up working out for whatever reason. There's just too many guys on the offensive end who needed the ball in their hands to create, and they just didn't play as well off the ball, you could say. So for whatever reason, that didn't work out, and now, like you said, that they're a team that's a little bit thinner. Their guard rotation with all the picks that Danny Ainge accumulated from that KG and Paul Pierce trade to Boston, he's only hit on a few of them, you could say. Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are obviously two of them, but like Romeo Langford, he hasn't really seen the court much. Um, Marcus Smart, he hit on. Grant Williams, like you said, is very hit or miss. So it remains to be seen how the Celtics can shore up some of their rotations. Like you said, one of the biggest problems for them last year was people thought like the center position was very weak, and they kind of sort of got an answer that, brought in Tristan Thompson, who I think is pretty good. He can rebound, he can defend in space at times. But no, you're definitely right. The Celtics, I still think the Celtics are a very good team. But like you said, if the starters aren't performing, then it kind of puts the team in a hole. But thankfully for them, they have three guys who, on any given night, can really put up some big numbers.
Yeah, 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 definitely, definitely. But another thing I just want to quickly say, as because you just kind of mentioned it, their center rotation is not exactly the best. It's built very uniquely in the sense that they don't really have a traditional center other than Tristan Thompson, but he doesn't get the amount of playing time as some of the other guys. Like Daniel Tice is more of a power forward, but he's definitely like a rim protector, but he can definitely shoot as well. So definitely like kind of a unique guy. And then they've got Robert Williams, who I think is probably the most unique center on their team just because he's super athletic. He can shoot free throws, he can shoot the mid range, but he doesn't choose to shoot threes. But like with that being said, like he's very quick on his feet. He can move left to right, up and down hella fast. But it's just something that, like, the Celtics, they usually don't make moves at the trade deadline, but it's definitely a season and an opportunity this year, especially with the trade exception, that they might, or maybe they should make a push for a player off the bench, whether it be a center, and kind of just fix their center rotation, or if it's going to be another scorer. Me personally, I mean, I'm not going to get too into it, but like I would love to see a guy like JJ Redick come off the bench and shoot a little bit, or honestly, just anybody that's able to give that type of offensive flow to that team.
Is there any other players that you think they should target with their trade exception? Because it's a pretty big trade exception, isn't it? Like 27 million.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's tons of guys I'd love to see, but the ones that I feel like are attainable is probably JJ Redick. There's been a lot of reports on Nikola Vucevic, but I'm not too sure how that would be. I feel like the Celtics are gonna have problems guarding Joel Embiid, Giannis, and with like Nikola Jokic. Even now they're having trouble, so I feel like there's not really too much that they can do about that.
I think one of the biggest problems for them with this trade exception, and I shouldn't even say it's a problem because obviously it's great to have something like that, is that when you have a trade exception, you still have to give up pieces to get other great players back. So, say for example, they were looking to get Vucevic. They're obviously not giving up Jason Tatum. They're not giving up Jalen Brown. You wouldn't need to include Kemba Walker in that trade. Even who knows? Maybe you trade Kemba for Vooch. That's an interesting wormhole we can get into if we want. But if you're using the trade exception, you don't need to trade Kemba. But if you're using it, then you would have to give some young, intriguing players or some draft picks back. The Boston Celtics draft picks don't look like they're going to be great for the foreseeable future, considering how great. What I mean great, I mean they don't look like they're going to be lottery picks in the foreseeable future because Tatum is still very young and Jalen Brown is still very young, and they're both already very, very good, and they're going to be a perennial playoff team as long as they stay healthy together. Um, and none of the Celtics young players, you could say like Romeo Langford, Carson Edwards, Grant Williams maybe is an intriguing player, but none of them really have that that high value or that high upside ceiling that a lot of these teams look for when they look to trade like big name players. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. Like you were saying before, Danny Ainge kind of has a problem drafting outside the top five, top six picks in the draft. Like you look at his first round pick this year, his first pick it was Aaron Neesmith, and that's a dude that can't even find playing time when the team is injured and the lineups are very thin. Like last night he did not play, and I don't think it was because of injury. It was just because he's not NBA ready, in my opinion. He's very slight, and he came into the league and he got drafted for his shooting, and he hasn't been shooting the ball well. He's only shooting about 31%. So I mean, like you said, like we got to give these guys some time, but at the same time, like they're not really worth that much trade value as of now. So it's gonna be tough for the Celtics. They're in a place where they probably should make a move, but they probably can't, if that makes any sense, without giving up like a key player on their team. It's probably going to be narrowed down to, and I hate to say this because I'm one of my favorite players, but it would probably end up being Marcus Smart, which would suck, or another key player.
You what would one guy who I think that, and this is very unrealistic and it's not going to happen. But Jeremy Grant, I would love to see him on the Celtics team, play at that power forward position. Starting lineup would be Kemba, Jalen, Jason, Jeremy Grant, and then Tristan Thompson or Daniel Tice, whatever. But he would be very intriguing with this team. Defend, and you've seen it now that he can put the ball on the floor and create a little bit, and he can score efficiently. He can hit open shots. He's not a great rebounder, but if you have Tristan Thompson as your focal point on rebounding, I think you're okay. That's obviously very unrealistic. The Pistons just signed him to a 3 or 4 year deal, and it wouldn't make sense to trade him in the first year of that deal unless you're getting like a pretty good haul back, because he's been playing very well for them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's gonna be pretty crazy, or either that, or it's gonna be a very dead trade line for the Celtics. Either way, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I feel like we've been talking about the Celtics for like a pretty big while. You want to talk about the Clippers and their future?
Sure. So as of right now, I believe the Clippers are either the third. Yeah, they're the third seed after losing last night to the Boston Celtics. Um, they so far this season, one of my biggest concerns coming in was that they wouldn't be able to make up for the loss of points that Montrezl gave them. I think he gave them like 18 a night last night. But so far they haven't really shown that to be a problem. They've been one of the better offensive teams in the league this year. in terms of like offensive rating and particularly shooting from three. They've been really good at 3-point shooting. Like I said, they have the best percentage in the league at like 41, 42%. So they've been doing their thing on that on that side of the ball. So and Serge Ibaka has really been great for them. Serge has been averaging like I think he's averaging like 12 to 13 points, but his shooting that gives the team ability to space out and that 5 out spacing it opens up the floor for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to drive and kick. Drive and kick is one of the biggest. It's kind of the biggest. Um, like what's the word? It's kind of the biggest focal point of Tyronn Lue's offense. And Tyronn Lue has really he's empowered Paul George and Kawhi to become they've become the what's it called? They've become like the ball handlers and the playmakers on this team. That was one of most people's biggest concerns with this team is they don't have a traditional point guard, like a Kyle Lowry, like um, a Jeff Teague. They don't have that kind of traditional point guard who can set up the offense. But in Tyronn Lue's offense, that really has not mattered because Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are now the primary ball handlers.
Damn, you got me. I was about to say a great pickup for the Clippers would have been Kyle Lowry, but I mean, you kind of mentioned him. Dude, I feel like that team would be nice if they were able to add somebody like Lowry, because like Clippers, they definitely have not an issue, but kind of like a weak spot in their team, and that's in the point guard position. So I just figured, Kyle Lowry would be nice.
See, I
Or
agree that they wait. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, actually, never mind. Go for it. What's up?
See, I agree that a weak point in their rotation is the guard rotation, but I have a different reason for why it's a weakness. Like I said, that Paul George and Kawhi have been made the primary ball handlers on offense for the Clippers, and the rest of the guys just spot up around them. But my main reason that I think the guard rotation is weak is like I mentioned earlier. Patrick Beverly he's had a history now of lower body injuries that have kept him out at crucial times. I believe in 2018 2017, 2018, or 2018, 2019 season. I believe he missed almost the entire season after having like an ACL injury or something. So, and this has been a problem for him. And now he's hurt. And you see that the rest of the Clippers guards, Reggie Jackson, Lou Kennard, Lou Williams, none of these guys are good defenders. So after Patrick Beverly, the Clippers defense from their guards falls off a cliff and the offense most of the time really can't make up for it because Lou Williams is obviously he can put the ball on the floor, he can play make, he can create shots, but come playoff time, he's not a great playoff player because he's a little bit smaller, he's slight, and these bigger defenders can really bottle him up and give him trouble in the playoffs. So if it was up to me and I was the general manager of the Clippers, I would try to get another guard who can play better defense, who can spot up and hit open threes. Since
Yo,
Kawhi,
how is
go ahead.
TJ McConnell? How do you like him?
No, I'm good on TJ McConnell. I'm,
What?
I'm
He's
chilling.
nice. He's a decent defender.
I'd rather have George Hill. George Hill is a better shooter.
But not true, true. But he's hurt right now, so
Yeah,
he'll be taking a risk if you go for him now.
yeah, but it's still. I think that's their biggest weakness is that come playoff time they only have one good guard defensively, and the rest of the guards aren't good enough defensively to really make up for that. So that in my opinion is their biggest weakness as of right now.
That's a fair point, yo. All right, yo. Imagine if they got Marcus Smart.
Dude, I would
That
I
would
would do a Marcus Smart for Patrick Beverly trade right now. I would do
you
that
should. I would
right
not
now.
as Celtics. Nah, hell no. But yo, honestly, I feel like Smart would fit really well into that team. Maybe limit his um amount of threes, but like
Could you
definitely
could
would
you
be.
imagine him and Marcus Morris competing to see who can chuck the most shots?
Marcus Moore's kind of nice with it though. Like he's honestly a great player, and I haven't seen that from him this year or even the last year. But on the Celtics, he was different. He was literally knocking down these hard shots. He was creating these shots basically from thin air, and it was great to see from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Marcus Morris he's an intriguing player. He doesn't really have the quickness to get by people this year. He hasn't really been doing that, but he's a pretty great spot up shooter. In that Brooklyn game, he hit a big shot at the end of the game to give the Clippers a chance. They obviously ended up losing, but last year in the playoffs, Marcus Morris shot 47% from three on like pretty high attempts. So he's a guy that he's an integral piece of the Clippers, and he's very intriguing if they decide to run like a small lineup and run with like Patrick Beverly, Paul George, Kawhi, Batum, and Morris, which they've done, and that lineup has really run people out of the gym. So,
True, true, true. All right, I got one more question for you. How far do you think that the Clippers are gonna go this year?
man, that's tough. I still think the Lakers are the best team in the not only the Western Conference, but I think the NBA, and I think they should be the favorites to win the championship. Not complete favorites considering Brooklyn, their offense is just very it's very hard to stop, and Philly's looking really different. And the Clippers obviously have given the Lakers problems, particularly Paul George. He's played very well against them. But I think it all depends on matchups. I think the Clippers should make the Western Conference Finals this year, at the very least. But if they run into a team like, say, the Jazz, who have always given the Clippers problems, Mike Conley has always played well versus them, or even like the Suns, DeAndre Ayton. We talked about a while back was that DeAndre Ayton he's their X factor. If he plays well and he's aggressive, he has all the tools to be dominant. And he's a guy, and that team is a team that I think that can give the Clippers problems because they have some good defensive players on the wings like Mikal Bridges and Jay Crowder. Those guys are good defenders, and they can kind of give Kawhi and Paul George some. They can make them work for their shots. But I think at the very least, they should be in the Western Conference Finals this year. Like, there's no excuses compared to last year. And if Ty Lue continues to do his great coaching job, I think they should be there.
Definitely, man. I just want to see the Clippers win a little bit. You feel me? Like they've been kind
Yeah,
of trash on as a franchise, and they've
you're,
got the players and personnel to do it this year. So hopefully we get to see that this year.
yeah, man. I would love nothing more than the Clippers to win the championship. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and on top of that, man, I think people gotta start respecting my guy Paul George a little bit more, man. He's different, man. He's not what people think that he is in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, the narrative that Paul George is a playoff choker is very overblown. Last year, he in the bubble after the Maverick series says he was dealing with mental health problems. And one of the main narratives that's completely wrong is that people think Paul George absolutely sucked the entire playoff run, when in actuality, in the Denver series, he was better than Kawhi. Kawhi was a no-show in the second half, Game 6, and in Game 7. Paul George no-showed Game 7, just like everybody else. But I thought he was awesome in that series. Jamal Murray tricks everyone. Jamal Murray is not an all-star player. He had one good game versus the Clippers, and one of the main reasons for that was Paul George. Paul George held him to like 33% shooting when he was guarding him, and he he just locked up Jamal Murray almost that entire series. Jamal Murray only had like one or two good games in that series.
See that's one of the things about Paul George and just shooters in general. It's like they have a few bad games, and all of a sudden people are kind of looking down on him just because those few games. Like for example, I'm not gonna say he's an amazing player, but like I had to say, but like Danny Green, for example, he had a few games where he was just shooting really bad, and he's known for his shooting. But all of a sudden, people want to say that he can't shoot, he's a bad player, and all that. And I guess the same kind of applies with Paul George in the sense that those few games kind of defines how his playoff run is. Although like we've been saying, he's a great player. I just think like that narrative is kind of I don't think that's where it's at.
And it's weird to me not only for that reason. It's also weird because like he's come off some of the biggest injuries. He broke his leg. Um, and that was one of the craziest injuries I remember seeing that, and really just going back, and just like flinching at it because it was so, yeah, it was just like disgusting how bad it was. And he came back from that, and he came back even better. You know what I mean? Like, that's not something you normally hear, that a guy has an injury that bad and comes back better from it. Uh, and not only that, like he came back and finished top three in MVP and top three in Defensive Player of the Year. Remember 2 years ago in February, like it wasn't crazy to think that Paul George could win the MVP. I mean, it was crazy by the end of
Mhm.
the year because he got hurt again, and the Thunder went into the playoffs hurt and they lost to the Blazers. But it wasn't crazy at a moment to think, hey, Paul George could win the MVP and he could possibly win Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, and on top of that, you know, this year he's part of that 50-40-90 club, and this is arguably one of his best seasons. Beside that MVP year, you could argue this is the best season. I mean, he's averaging 24 and a half points on 50% from the field and 48% from three, with 90% from free throws. And on top of that, he's assisting the ball more than he's ever done. and he's rebounding. So it's just like, you know, I just don't agree with people when they say that Paul George is a bad player, and then especially in the playoffs, like I don't really think that narrative has anything to do with it. Because if you remember when he was part of the Pacers team, he was legitimately single-handedly competing with LeBron and D Wade and all those other guys, and he like his team was not nowhere near where LeBron's team was at the time, and I just think that people forget about it. You know what I mean?
That Pacers team was pretty great defensively, and Roy Hibbert had like a great series. But outside of that, it was really just Paul George going back and forth with LeBron and having and really matching him for the most part, shot for shot. Sure, he didn't show up in that game 7, but I mean he was very young at that time. You know what I mean? Um, One of the craziest things to me is that Damian Lillard is considered like a great playoff player,
I knew you were gonna go
and Paul
there.
George is considered a choker. Which I mean, if you actually go look at the numbers, Damian Lillard falls off more than any star player in the NBA today in terms of shooting percentages come playoff time. Damian Lillard's reputation is made off that one series in 2019 in the first round, and then he ended up playing the Denver Nuggets, who were a year early to the playoffs. That got taken 7 games by the Spurs, by the way. And that Spurs team had no business playing that well. So they went 7 with Denver, and Damian Lillard. Don't forget he shot 3 of 17 in Game 7, and had to get bailed out by C.J. McCollum. I believe it was like 39 or 41 points he scored in that Game 7, and then he went into the he went into the Western Conference Finals versus the Warriors, who were out Kevin Durant. And remember, they had 3 games they led by double digits at halftime, and they ended up getting swept by Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green. Draymond Green turned back the clock and was amazing that series. Steph showed that Damian Lillard isn't in the same stratosphere as him. So that's that. It's more so the way that these players are covered, I should say. Damian Lillard is given like the utmost respect for doing not doing as much for do okay, he's accomplished stuff, but he hasn't really done that much in the grand scheme. And Paul George, he has a similar level of accomplishments, but he's shitted on like by everybody. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm not gonna say nothing just because I let you get all the hate for taking on Damon like that. You feel me? But yeah, no, I definitely kind of agree with that sentiment. Just because I mean, I don't have the stats right in front of me, but if I remember correctly, like Dame has won like one like accomplishment or one accolade throughout his entire career, from what I remember. Beside like an All Star appearance, but I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was Rookie of
Oh,
the
are
Year
you talking
or
about the bubble MVP?
bro, my man really went there. I
The
forget.
Mickey
I
Mouse.
forget. I forget what it was, but it was something along the lines of like he's had like one first team all NBA or something like that, and then nothing other than that. Like no league leading scorers, nothing like that. You know what I mean?
Are we continuing on the Dame train? Because I have one last thing to say.
We could see that one last thing, and then we'll call it for today.
All right, for sure. So if you remember, Damian Lillard at the start of the season or before, he said about Paul George and the Clippers that keep running from the grind. You guys are chumps. In the first game that he played versus the Clippers this season, the Blazers got blown out. If it wasn't for CJ McCollum, who before he got hurt, man, I thought CJ was having an all-star season, and he was awesome. I think he was averaging like 28 points. So hope CJ can come back soon. But in that game, if it wasn't for CJ, it would have been like a 40-point blowout. Damian Lillard shot 3 of 14 and 0 of 8 from 3. Um, and the next game, he says Steph Curry won't get the same looks that he got when he played with KD and Clay and Dre. And then Steph Curry drops 62 on his team's head. Um, and then Adidas drops in. By the way, this shoe is ugly as shit. It's very ugly. They drop um, a
Yo,
colorway.
my dude hated him.
Yeah, no, dude, I can't. I don't like Damian Lillard. So he drops a colorway commemorating his first round win versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, and commemorating his 50-point game to close out the series. And then the next day he proceeds to lose to that team. Uh, like you can't write it better than what has happened so far. I just love to see it.
I'm dead, man. I mean, yeah, I kind of get it. Like, he's kind of going on kind of a frenzy of, just like showing people up and then not actually showing them up. Like, that shoe, I'm not gonna lie, that sounds pretty bad.
Like, bro, he called out a reporter for tweeting about him Like, could you imagine if like Paul George or LeBron James did that? Could you imagine they get torn to fucking shreds, and people would be like, "Why are you listening to the media? Why are you entertaining like people talking about you online?" You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna put a guy in conversations that one in the first place he shouldn't be in, like he's not in James Harden or Steph Curry's stratosphere, then hold them to the same standards instead of holding them to the standards of like fucking Wayne Ellington. Like,
I thought
it
it was
makes me sick.
Rodney McGruder.
It's crazy to
Yeah,
me, bro.
they violated him, man. But yeah, no, I definitely get that. All right, yo, you want to call it for today?
Yeah, I think I'm done talking shit about Damian Lillard for the day.
Dead. You gotta be dead, bro. All right, guys. Appreciate you guys listening to our podcast. You guys can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you guys listen to your podcast at Push the Tempo Podcast with Aray and Kyle. I'm Aray, and the other guy that's hating on Dame Lillard is Kyle. We're also on YouTube. We put some pretty decent gameplay, so you guys, if it's easier to listen on YouTube, you guys can check us out there at the East Coast Browncast. We're on Instagram and Twitter at ECBcast. So leave some comments there, something like that. If you guys want to have a hot take or anything like that featured on our podcast, leave a comment or tweet at us, and we'll definitely put that in. With that, guys, that's pretty much it. Catch you on the next episode.